Resident Evil is a series that needs little introduction, a franchise nearly 30 years old and beloved across the globe. It has redefined what a horror game really is. Ever since 1996 when the first Resident Evil came out, and yes, this is my second video on Resident Evil, but with the announcement of Requiem and the 30th anniversary coming up, I couldn't resist stepping foot once again into the world of survival horror. After the success of the first game, Capcom would go ahead and try to replicate it and even try to surpass the popularity of the first Resident Evil. They were almost done with the sequel, Resident Evil 2. They were almost done, and then right at about 70-80%, they threw it out. They literally scrapped the entire project. But what happened to the unfinished game? Was it thrown into the sun? Did Capcom bury it in the desert like those ET cartridges? Or maybe it was somewhere out there. The curiosity of the Resident Evil community would grow to form an obsession after this piece of gaming lost media, creating a hunt full of betrayal, death threats, and high finances. A hunt spanning 15 years that ruined some lives as well. We're talking about the hunt for the missing Resident Evil prototype, Resident Evil 1.5. The Resident Evil 2 prototype, or 1.5, has quite a tale to tell. Not just because of how ambitious it was, but also for the insane hunt that it created. But first, I want to give you some backstory on the game and its development. The events of Resident Evil 2 take place just 2 months after the events of the first game. You know, the game with the sad trumpet basement music? Taking place in the small Midwestern town called Raccoon City, Leon and Claire arrived to Raccoon City separately. Leon starting his first day as a member of the RPD, and Claire looking for her boulder-punching brother, Chris. Once arriving, they come to discover that the city has been overrun with the dead and must fight to survive. The playable cast from the finished product were fan-favorite rookie cop Leon S. Kennedy and college student Claire Redfield. Now, if we look at the RE prototype cast, we still have Leon, and instead of Claire, we have this lady. Ma'am? Who are you? Well, this is Elza Walker. She was originally meant to be the second playable character. Elza would share a lot of characteristics that Claire would have in the end. But, as we all know, Elza was not in the final version. There were a significant amount of differences between the prototype and the final games besides just Elza. Story-wise differences, people like Marvin would survive most of the game, and the Chief was actually an ally of sorts, instead of serial killer Dennis Reynolds from that one scene in It's Always Sunny.
D? I swear you would be of more use to me if I skinned you and turned your skin into a lampshade.
Gameplay-wise, some changes were instead of that sweet green herb kush to heal, you instead had sweet science juice. The player could equip body armor that would actually show up on the character model. It would also include larger, more unpredictable hordes of zombies and monsters. Now, you may be thinking that that sounds cool, but it does sound like a lot for the capabilities of the PS1 hardware at the time, and you'd be right. Now, to try to make up for the lack of processing of the hardware of the PlayStation 1 at the time, they lowered the poly count on enemies and character models. Now, while this did work, it did give them the hordes that they wanted, but the enemies just look weird. Shinji Mikami would go on to say that this made them much less scary. I mean, he's right, it looks like they're fighting something that's just a notch above RuneScape zombie. He would go on to be quoted as also saying, "No one element was specifically boring, just everything as a whole." He'd also say that the prototype was just no fun. The last thing you want in a sequel as huge as this is to be boring. Another thing Shinji hated was the prototype layout of the now iconic police station. In the original, it was just a boring modern office. Saying, "We saw that the second floor, third floor, and basement all had the same look. The game was about 70% done, but it just sucked." From here, Capcom brought in famed scriptwriter Nobuo Sugimura, a guy who basically wrote my childhood. Sugimura told them to throw it away and start over. Resident Evil 2 was originally set for a May 1997 release, but now, because of this setback, it had to be pushed back to at least August of 97. With the help of Sugimura, they were able to move pretty quickly. However, Capcom didn't have much footage of the new build of the game. Capcom only had the old build, so at cons and game shows they would put the old build on display, occasionally spliced in with some footage of the new build. It's believed that the last time that 1.5 was seen in the wild was April 1997 for the Tokyo Game Show. Later that year, RE1 would be re-released with a director's cut that included some quality of life improvements. Unfortunately, one of those improvements was not the voice acting. It also included a Resident Evil 2 demo disc, kind of as a "we promise we're working on it, thank you for your patience" kind of thing. The new demo was fairly close to the final build. Things from the old build were scrapped, some were repurposed, and now it was starting to look like the RE2 we know today, complete with Back to the Future pictures. Soon, Resident Evil 2 was released, and it became the best-selling Resident Evil game across all platforms. And that kind of leaves you wondering, what was it like before? Whatever happened to the one that we saw at E3, the Tokyo Game Show, and in magazines? It turns out that Capcom still had working builds of the prototype. The year is 1999, and in Osaka, Japan, a Capcom employee burned some data onto a disk. A seemingly mundane activity, but this small act would be the catalyst for a lost media hunt that would span 15 years. As you probably guessed, the data on the disk was an early prototype of Resident Evil 2. The Capcom employee would reach out to a Kim Larson, a mod on bioflames.com. Bioflames used to be the place to go for anything 1.5 related. Unfortunately, it's no longer around, so pour one out for the homies at Bioflames. Kim's Capcom contact sent them 138 images of the prototype in action. Seeing this, Kim came to the conclusion that there must still be a working build for the prototype. After the images were published, Kim's friend vanished, most likely silenced by big Capcom. Or fired or sued or something logical. We don't know, but one thing we do know is that this mystery was only getting started. Suspicions all but confirming that there was a working prototype floating somewhere out there in the ether. The community would scratch and claw for years to no avail towards finding this working prototype. A Bioflames user going by Alzier would talk about how he bought a PS1 just to play Resident Evil, and when he got his copy of Resident Evil 2, something felt off. The game looked nothing like what he was promised in magazines, and he became obsessed with finding the game that was presented in those articles. Scratching and digging, they could not find much information on this older build until about 2005. 2005, a Latvian fan known as Shrouded, I suck at pronouncing names, I'm just going to call him Sorry. He posted images of what could only be assets of rooms in the 1.5 game that came from the PS1. Through some mining and extractions, it turned out that Sardi found the assets hidden in the data files of the RE2 demo disc. Apparently, Capcom had not even bothered to remove the data from these discs, so for the first time, fans could kinda sort of play a smidge of 1.5. Despite this finding, there were numerous instances where the community thought that they had found it, or someone emerged saying they found it, only to be met with ghosting or hoaxes. One user would mention she was scared off after receiving death threats from the community over the prototype. It was around this time that there was a lot of infighting between admins, mods, and even other forum sites. So the community was left in the lurch, and bar someone coming forward with a playable disc or data, it was really looking bleak.
Now, off-topic question. What is the easiest way to get out of a contract? I'm going somewhere with this. It's to die.
In America, when someone dies, that will usually get them out of a contract. According to US law, most NDAs cannot be enforced after someone passes away. Now, why does this matter? Well, some Capcom employees, like Kim's friend, occasionally would get things like demo discs or unfinished things to test. But if they sold it, each copy had a very specific code made just for that person that Capcom could easily assess who that disc belonged to, and get them in all kinds of legal trouble. So, a legend would have it, back in 2007, a former Capcom employee kicked the bucket. At that employee's estate sale, amongst the used furniture and Precious Moments figurines, there was a copy of their RE2 prototype for sale. Around this time, a member of the 1.5 community, named .50cal, was approached by a contact of his, saying that they knew somebody who had acquired a Resident Evil 1.5 disc and may be willing to part with it. Dot, who was reasonably suspicious that this may be another hoax, asked for some more information from his contact. He wanted to make sure that the person who owned the disc actually owned the disc, instead of maybe accidentally just selling them another copy of Resident Evil 2. Or like Tumba or something. While they waited for more information, the RE community raised $4,000 to make a quick offer contingent on if the disc was legit. This dragged on until October, when they were informed that someone had already beaten them to the punch and bought it before they could make that offer. For only $300. Disheartened, the members of the community held out hope that whoever bought it would go ahead and release more information on it. Because that was the point. They wanted the information out there in the public so that it could be preserved as a piece of PlayStation history. Weeks later, a website called PlayStation Museum launched a review on 1.5. After matching the timeline to the posts, Dot and the rest of the community figured out that this was the guy who bought the disc from out under them. Dot, along with Alzier, thought this guy had the most information on 1.5 that they've seen in a long time, so they figured that it would be a good idea to hang out on his forums to maybe poke and prod for some little information. Dot would try to reach out to the owner of the forums at some time, a guy going by the Curator. Throughout the time that they spent on the boards, the Curator kept posting that a secret surprise would be coming on Halloween, and also saying that he doesn't want to spoil the plot of the game. When asked why this was, users speculated that he would release the game on Halloween. It turned out it was only an update of pictures with the characters with blood on them, a warning sign to the future of things to come. To say that the Curator is actually going to be the villain of the story would be appropriate, because he's a toy. Eventually, the Curator would get back to Dot in the community. He would reach out to them asking for things like translations for in-game things, item lists, etc., hoping maybe to warm up to him and maybe earn some kind of kinship so that more information can be released. Dot agreed. Hoping that they had warmed up to the Curator at some point, Dot and Alzier brought up the subject of releasing the game to the public. The Curator would either ignore or change the subject. November of that year, a user going by PS Monitor posted a link on the forums to showing someone playing 1.5. A user going by Goro Masida. Apparently it was someone pretending to be Japanese, and it was super not believable. This account had a post also saying that they were willing to sell the 1.5 disc for 1 million yen or 10,000 USD. Sleuths in the community found out that this PS Monitor user was the same guy as the YouTube channel. After some investigation by the sleuths on the forums, it's highly believed that the Goro Masida page belonged to the Curator, who had begun a trolling campaign against the community. For even more trolling, in late December of that year, the Curator opened up a new topic on 1.5. He asked people to discuss their impressions of it. Instead, users asked him if they would tell them any more information about the disc. He literally just replied, no. It got even weirder because later on in that thread, he asked for a free PSP be sent to him, and he would also request somebody to send himself a photograph of somebody who looks like Elza Walker. Hey guys, Lorlock here. Wanted to give you some advice here real lickety-split. If you ever find yourself with rare, one-of-a-kind, lost media, don't hold it over community or others just to get gooning material. Goon ethically, kids. Anyway, let's get back to our program. Pulling their money together for one last try, the community reached out to the Curator once more. Crickets. From here, he would go on a campaign of vicious mockery towards the RE community, dangling 1.5 just out of their reach. He would make multiple accounts on multiple different forums just to taunt and try to sow discord just for funsies. See what I mean? He's a The game was just out of their reach, but it was just so close. And the Curator knew this. The Curator also knew how desperate the community was. In late December 2007, he then would list it on eBay for $125,000.
He's insane!
To make things a little bit more insulting, he actually registered an account with the name BioFlames, just as a giant fuck you to the community. After digesting this a little bit and making a very cohesive timeline, thank you, .cal, .cal would actually address the community. So, where are we now? Curator scoops the disc from under the community for $300 and states his intentions soon after. Curator, I believe I have said this already, and I don't mean to throw fuel in the fire, but I personally have never had the urge to play RE 1.5, and I never understood why everyone was so interested in the game. I volunteered to test the game based on the fact that it is an important piece of PlayStation history. And in his review, he states he's played 1.5 more than Biohazard 2 itself, which couldn't have been very long considering he only had the disc for a few days when it went up. Then he tries to get as much information from the community as possible about the game. Translations, item locations, etc., before giving them a big fuck you and cutting off contact. He then registers YouTube and forum accounts, attempting to conceal his identity, goading people to pay exorbitant amounts of money for the disc, while simultaneously ignoring real offers from the community to purchase it for a healthy sum. Finally, in late December, he puts it on eBay for $125,000, with the eBay name BioFlames, an obvious insult thrown at the community. He's shown that he is nothing but a child throughout all of this, trying to get people's hopes up that a real sale will come while saying he's interested in selling it, and then ignoring real offers from the community. What a twat. According to Alzier, the curator confirmed that the physical disc had beginning to degrade. The curator did also mention that he still had the data, however, on a drive. Hearing this information, Alzier and other members came together and offered him one last Hail Mary, $8,000 for a copy of the data on a disc. After all the trolling, harassment, and childish antics, the curator had finally agreed. In April of that year, Alzier finally had a disc with 1.5's data in his hands. Awesome, right? Happy ending. You should know me better than that by now. 1.5 is the gift that keeps on giving. Alzier and his cabal of Resident Evil lovers played the prototype and found there really wasn't much there. It was fairly bare with not much to do on it. The build was roughly about 40% complete. However, this is the whole thing that the curator had. So, from this point on, Alzier knew what he had to do. He was given a mission from God himself. He had to finish the game. Alzier assembled a team to finish the game. Acquiring some programmers and artists, Team IGAS was born, or Team I Got a Shotgun. However, as the quote goes, you either leave the forms a hero, or you shitpost long enough to become a troll. Or something like that. I don't know, it's been a long time since I've seen Dark Knight. While Team IGAS was working on the game, you'd assume that they would have released it to the public, as releasing the information to the community was the original point of acquiring the disc. But instead, they had become what they had hated. They become the gatekeepers of this game, not releasing it to anyone and wanting to keep their version as like the main narrative. One man, Richard Mandel, a guy who would actually write a book on the hunt for Resident Evil 1.5, said that Team IGAS would spy on its dissenters, infiltrate private forums, and work on discrediting other fans and restoring the game. He even claimed that they stole and doctored the work of other modders in the community in an attempt to discredit them and achieve sole control of the 1.5 creative decisions. Years of infighting with the community left everyone distraught, defeated, and dejected. It was like having to deal with the curator all over again, except this time it was a whole group of curators. These gaslight gatekeep guy bosses were literally holding on to that thing with a death grip and holding it over the community. Until one day, randomly an eBay auction was posted and it contained ancient games, a PS2 test kit, and supposedly a disc containing Resident Evil 1.5. It had to be fake. Couldn't be just randomly here on eBay, could it? Richard Mandel would go on to say that he was also convinced that it was fake as well, but noticed a screenshot that had never been released before, not a grab from old videos, nothing from trailers, and nothing that Team IGAS had produced either. On June 4th, 2013, Richard Mandel won the eBay auction for $2,025. He had won the auction for one of the most desired pieces of survival horror history. To the ire of Team IGAS, he would release the game to the public, and this version was dubbed the 40% build, as this version was pretty much the same thing that Team IGAS had originally acquired. Everything seems tied up in a nice bow. Team IGAS has their magic zombie door build with all their fun little additions, and we have the version that was released to the public, the 40% build. But one mystery still remains. The pictures from 1999, the ones that Kim Larson was sent. Those pics weren't in anything that they could find in either versions, in either the IGAS build or the 40% build or any other builds they could find, which means a more complete build exists somewhere out there. This story had spread so far and wide, even came to the point where Capcom itself would kind of make a nod at the Easter egg itself and would include an Elza Walker skin as an Easter egg outfit for Claire. Now, what did we learn from this? I don't know, man. The story of the search for Resident Evil 1.5 is one of tenacity and drive for a community. A story not unlike treasure hunting movies. The journey, experience, and friends we made along the way, or the enemies that we made along the way. It's a story about a community coming together and creating some kind of unity. Yes, like the curator was a bit of a twat, but he inadvertently created an entire community that really, really wanted this game, and also a community that really, really hated him. I think I'll end this the way an article I found on this topic did, and quote the last line in Richard Bandel's book. For treasure is what you make of it, and treasure always tracks the bad, as well as the good. And that was the story of the Resident Evil prototype. Let me know what your favorite Resident Evil was, and if it's not Nemesis, I'll tell you while you're wrong in the comments below. I appreciate you all sticking around, it really warms this undead heart. Special thanks to my patrons scrolling on the screen, I literally can't do this without you. Join me next time when we try to reenact the events of Raccoon City. And as always, cheers.